Hello, my name is KHALID Mather and I am the Advocacy Coordinator for Wild Ocean South Africa. My work focuses largely on marine protected areas and advocacy around them, how to expand the benefits for them, and also to generate new ways of thinking about protected areas. One of the challenges facing the expansion of protected areas is unlocking new ways for financing them. Financing protected areas has always been a challenge in the world, often with the state taking ownership of the natural environment and then conferring the benefits out of the protected areas. We, however, are trying to untap new ways of or new rationale for financing protected areas, utilizing multiple players, including the state, local businesses, and local communities. So my presentation is numbered. You can follow along. I'm hopping into slide 2, explaining what's a natural asset. So a natural asset can be defined as the natural environment and the benefits that accrue from having exposure to that natural environment. These can include benefits along the lines of ensuring that a business remains viable, and also serving as an investment an investment location for businesses and livelihoods to develop around. So there's the tangible as well as the geographic component of a natural asset, which can generate values around them. This is broadly encapsulating the actual derived tangible benefits like fish, as well as the geographic benefits like ecotourism, which can develop around natural assets. So one of the overarching aims of our research that we're embarking on is to try and quantify the values that we are deriving from a natural asset, particularly from the Isimangaliso Wetland Park, which is a marine protected area in northern KwaZulu-Natal. So one mechanism for quantifying natural environments is to apportion the values over categories like ecosystem services and environmental services, some of which the natural asset users and stakeholders can actively engage with and abstract with, and the other one, like the environmental services, which is something less direct but also quantifiable and has benefit to humankind. I'm on slide 4 now, and this slide is demonstrating how classical valuation mechanisms have led to a disconnect between the people living in and around the protected areas and benefiting and having a relationship with the natural environment, and the wider earth, which views conservation as partisan, as something that is useful, something that is useful, but benefits largely minority who don't really engage or live with the realities around those protected areas. Okay, so there's a name for this kind of dynamic, this relationship, and it infiltrates most of society. I come from a communist, an activist background, and we recognize the overarching narrative as neoliberal capitalism. So what we have to do is really try and generate value outside of this linear economic model, out of utilizing the environment in a finite capacity. So to do that, we have to assess how people can engage in a sustainable and regenerative relationship with the environment. And so we borrow components from blue economy and the theory of change. So these are overriding principles which express that the relationship with the natural environment should be one that brings value and maintains value, particularly in terms of resilience and integrity of the natural environment and the people who engage with it. So how do we apply that into MPAs? Well, we can examine MPAs as a spectrum. We can examine MPAs as a spectrum where differing uses and priorities can have a flexibility. So where the flexibility exists is where we can bring in communities and generate the sustainable livelihood narrative and essentially untap financing mechanisms to get people living around communities really on board with the marine protected areas. So to do this, we need to actually ascertain how they exist with the MPAs. So now I am on slide 10. How they exist with the MPAs, particularly in terms of the value that they derive. So the value streams refer again to the investment value and the insurance value. Well, broadly in the context of this this project and this approach, we're looking at those two streams and trying to quantify how much those are worth to the inhabitants and the stakeholders around the marine protected areas. So in slide 10, I kind of categorize these based on color. The insurance values can be surmised by the blue bordered diagrams. Without a functional natural environment, we open ourselves up to these shocks to the system. And by getting a complete valuation of what is at risk, we can apply several shocks to a model and determine the value that having the natural environment will possess in terms of assuaging the impact of these shocks. Then in the yellow bordered pictures on slide 10, we see the tangible investment values that can be derived from protecting the marine environment. So you got your direct benefits like your fish, like your whatever you actually abstract from the environment that can be sustainably harvested. So marine protected areas provide spillover capacity like this, and they emphasize and amplify what can be derived in terms of the investment value. Then the environment that the protected areas capacitate, that's also part of the investment value that you can get out of protecting the natural environment. You create more linkages for this social infrastructure to develop when you have functional ecological infrastructure. And the last type of valuation that we can quantify in protected areas is the climatic valuation mechanisms. So there is a lot of work and research being done on how to quantify and commodify carbon sequestration, lateral carbon transport, and we are going to mention and try and ascertain some of the key points for this in the research. So largely what we're trying to do is develop these stakeholders. So now I am in slide 11. Develop the stakeholder list for the protected areas, determine the value of the relationships between the stakeholders and the protected area, and then utilize those values to try and justify for more financing for protected area expansion. So page 12 kind of expresses this networking interrelationship that we're trying to determine, and this is derived from Obura 2020. He utilized the Sustainable Development Goals as quantification mechanisms. So in slide 13, I kind of bring together all of these ideals and map out the path forward. Essentially, the next phase is a stakeholder mapping exercise, determining the value of relationships to the protected area and categorizing and quantifying those relationships based on the insurance and the investment values derived. So in conclusion, the critical considerations for this presentation, as can be found in slide 14, are the capacity to incorporate national capital counting, which is the quantification component, theory of change, a bit of anti-capitalist rhetoric, as well as the sustainable development goals, because that is the end goal for marine protected areas. They can serve as engines of change and engines of sustainable development from which the world can learn. Okay, thank you. I end with slide 15. I look forward to any questions and comments. Bye.